and mine, welcome. We're so excited to get this off the ground. So, for anyone who's new to Reset and has never been with us for any of our other programs, I'll give you a little information about us. Our office is located in Fort Myers on a beautiful 12-acre campus at the Unitarian Universalist Church, just off of Daniels Road. And our goals are represented in the acronym that we use for our name, RESET: restorative, ecological, social, economic, and transformative systemic long-term solutions that address the root causes of our bioregion's environmental issues. And the two that we choose to focus on at this point are the right to clean water and regenerative agriculture. And our Reset outreach programs, much like the one that we're having here today, our Reset conversations, raise awareness and increase visibility and encourage the commitment of Southwest Florida citizens. We like to believe that we are being the change that we want to see in the world today. And I'd like to say, and I'm sure Holly's been at this much longer as an activist than I have, and I've been a journalist practicing activism with my pen. But until you actually see change start to happen, it's just a quote, it's a theory, what Margaret Mead said so long ago. Never forget that a small group of committed citizens can change the world, for indeed it is the only thing that ever has. And we who are part of Reset, that is what we're all committed, and our hearts are all in the right place for the good of the whole. And now we'll move on to a little bit of housekeeping. You all have a choice to either have speaker or have gallery, so you can see everybody at one time, or just see the speaker. That's your choice. If any of you have any questions that pop up during the course of this presentation, please put them in the chat, because Holly's going to be monitoring those, and she will ask the questions. Or if you care to ask the question yourself, you can let her know when you put your question in the chat. So we will all be muted during this, so we don't have any background noise, because this is being recorded. For anybody who couldn't make it to this program, we'll be able to send out the link so they can enjoy it. So let's begin. And that means that we'll start with, I want to do a brief introduction, just for names for now. Anyhow, we have five FGCU students with us: Marion Barracks, Peyton Lunsford, Jesse Rivera, and Morgan Crampton. And yeah, you can wave there so people know that who you are. And they will be taking over at the end of this, towards the end of this program. They're going to do the presentation. And so let's begin. Is Houston with us, Holly, yet? You're on mute, Holly, so I can't.
So we were hoping that Houston would be here on time, but he didn't make it on time. And I wouldn't be surprised if he joins us at some point in this Zoom. But we had asked Houston Cypress, who's from the Miccosukee tribe in the Otter clan, and he lives towards Miami near Big Cypress, to do our opening prayer. And the reason why we asked Houston to do that is because we, the larger we, especially we white people, those of us that are, have been asked whenever we gather, especially if we gather for something about caring for the earth and caring for creation, that we come into the spirit of reconciliation with the original nations, peoples that occupied the land before we came here. And so Houston was going to do that, which would be right and proper, being a full-blooded Native American person. So I really do hope he comes. And one of the things that we're hoping to do with Houston, Cypress, and perhaps our friend Lisette Morales is to go with Marion and Peyton and Morgan and Jesse and our 2 other students that are working today that couldn't show up today to take us on an Everglades experience deep into the Everglades and into Big Cypress to really experience the beauty and the power of our awesome river of grass. So with that, I'm just going to do an opening prayer and what we call a land acknowledgement. And this is what we are asked to do, to acknowledge that the place where I and we are sitting now was once occupied by the Calusa tribes, by the ancient Calusa tribes. They lived and thrived in these waters, in these coastal wetlands, and in the Everglades for thousands of years before the white people came. And so we really acknowledge them, and we bow in our hearts to the ancestors of this beautiful, beautiful place that we now call Southwest Florida. And we also deeply acknowledge both the Seminole and the Miccosukee tribes, who are very much in the struggle of trying to be good caretakers of the Everglades and all of the wetlands and the wildlands of Florida. So I offer a prayer to Great Spirit, to the Spirit of truth, to the source of all life, that in this gathering today, we find inspiration, we find hope, and that we feel a deeper connection with nature, and that we find our truth in nature as we move forward as caretakers, partners with the caretakers, and allies to make this world a better place for future generations and for the youngest of you here. So this sincere prayer, I know I can feel that you share it in your hearts too. And so with that, I'll use a Native American word and say aho and amen.
Aho. Thank you, Holly.
Blessings. You're welcome.
So you'll let me know if Houston does show up, then we'll let him talk about Love the Everglades, since he's the founder. So we're going to start out our program with Mike Savarasi, who's a professor, Department of Marine and Earth Sciences at FGCU. His teaching and research interests concern the history of the environmental change in coastal settings, particularly in response to human development, climate change, and sea level rise. His research has helped foster environmental management and restoration efforts in Southwest Florida, and has assisted archaeologists understand the environmental context of Calusa Native American culture evolution. How appropriate, right after Houston. So Mike, take the floor, it's yours.
Thanks, Linda. Thanks, Holly. Thanks, everybody. Nice meeting you. I see some familiar faces and some old friends, which is comforting. And I see new faces and hopefully new friends, which I guess is even more hopeful and comforting. And I'm particularly would like to welcome the young people. Linda asked if I would talk a little bit about efforts that are happening locally that are involving young people to help become more proactive when it comes to climate change, and to try to invoke changes in thinking, changes in culture, and changes in practice in the way climate change is being treated within the Southwest Florida region. I guess one of the big efforts that is going on, that at least for the time being involves high school students and middle school students, as it turns out, in Collier County, although this effort could be expanded, the concept anyway, could be expanded into other counties, and could also be expanded into a university setting. It doesn't have to be a high school setting. But here in Collier, working principally with a social sciences teacher at Gulf Coast High School here in Collier County, a man named Patrick Diemert, who couldn't be with us today because he's coaching basketball, which is a good thing to do on a Saturday afternoon. The two of us have been friends for a while, and I think we were inspired initially by Greta Thunberg's youthful, energetic, and forceful approach, and recognizing that young people can often have, or invariably have, a greater impact on the older generations that are controlling policies and management and government. And so the idea was, how can we instill that kind of youthful activism and at the high school level to make a difference in Collier County? And we organized a group that we call YAC, which is an acronym, YACC. It has nothing to do with mammals that live in the Himalayas that produce milk and butter, but rather it stands for Youth Against Climate Change. And the concept is to build leadership at the high school level, where that leadership is both knowledgeable and active in the community, and active in a cooperative, collaborative way. So the idea is, rather than maybe triggering activism that was more confrontational, activism that was meant to be more cooperative. And in many ways, that approach was inspired by Citizens Climate Lobby. I know Solomie is here somewhere in the room. I'm not seeing her at the moment. Solomie, can you?
There she is.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, Solomie. Citizens Climate Lobby, if you're not familiar with that group, and perhaps you all are, it's another great organization to get involved with. And Citizens Climate Lobby, as a national and international organization, is really all about nonpartisan, cooperative, productive activity to deal with climate change. And we sort of brought that concept or that ideal into YAC. We did a remarkable job of engaging virtually every public and 2 private high schools in Collier County. And we reached out and had teacher sponsors and clubs. A lot of them were environmentally based clubs that were interested in climate activities. And then, like everything else in our world, COVID hit and disrupted everything that we had set into place. And now as the high schools, public schools are back and not virtual, and are back in person, and teachers are back in person, and people are feeling more comfortable with meeting, we've reinstilled YAC, and we've got the program up and running again. So this is YAC, a second attempt at YAC. And let me tell you a little bit about where we are now and the kinds of things the group is doing. At the moment, we have 4 high schools in Collier County that are actively participating. Gulf Coast High School, which seems to be our premier school, mostly because Patrick Deemert is a teacher there and is directly involved with the students. Maple High School is involved. Barron Collier and Golden Gate High Schools are involved. So there are active chapters, if you will, at each of those schools, with both teacher sponsorship as well as students themselves. Back prior to COVID, we outlined a professional training curriculum, if you will, for YACers. And that involved a series of things. Some of it was providing background understanding and knowledge so that there was a strong foundation in understanding climate science, climate change and its effects, and practices to mitigate the impacts of climate change. It also involved employing tools for assessing vulnerability to changes in climate for our region. It also involved lobbyist training, again, with help from CCL. And the intent there was to bring YACers actually into congressional offices and have them work with members of the House of Representatives at the national level and senators as well. And some of that did happen in spite of COVID and is still happening today. And then there were plans to engage YACers with local government officials, people serving on city councils and our Collier County Board of Commissioners. In addition, YAC reached out to the public school district. We actually have their full support, so they don't view this as a negative or an antagonistic relationship, but are embracing it and are encouraging it in their schools. At the moment, we've got really we're trying for this to be student-driven rather than efforts that are driven by people that are serving as mentors. So in many ways, it's up to the schools and the clubs to make decisions about how they want to get involved. And then we are providing the resources and the guidance to make them successful. At the moment, there are two efforts that were originally conceived by the first generation of yackers that got interrupted by COVID that are going on currently now. One is something known as Project Waters, and Waters is another acronym whose name I don't recall. But suffice it to say, Project Waters is actually sponsored through some NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration funding. And the purpose of that grant is to develop young leaders to become the next generation of yackers. So within Project Waters, what we're doing is students within Yak are being trained as mentors and teachers, if you will, to help bring middle school students up from those grades, give them the background that they need to allow them to transition and become the next generation of productive and successful yackers as they transition to high school. We ran our first cohort of Project Waters students with Yak Student Help last summer, and the second cohort is going on now, and there'll be a third cohort that we have funding for in the spring. In addition, although it's not Yak related, there is money, some grant money that has also come to Florida Gulf Coast University through the Water School that's developing a similar program for Lee County. So middle school kids in Lee County have the same opportunities. So that's worked well. The second project, which is really just getting off the ground, is something Patrick and I are really excited about. And again, this was a student-initiated idea. It started out as an AP environmental sciences project for a student in one of the schools. And the idea is to have each of the schools, the high schools in Collier County, do a greenhouse gas inventory for their respective school. The idea is to look at just how consumptive and productive the schools are, the high schools are, when it comes to producing greenhouse gases, and then use that hopefully to drive some management or mitigation practices within the school or beyond. By that, I mean at the district level itself, at the higher level. And so Patrick and I are now just beginning to work with at least those four schools, the ones that I'd mentioned, Golden Gate, Barron Collier, Naples, and Gulf Coast, in getting greenhouse gas inventories moving there. And interestingly, we have, again, great support from the school district, from the superintendent, from the board, and from the science coordinator, the secondary ed science coordinator for the school district. Other things that are going on, there's a lot of interest in the club with respect to conversion to solar power. So we're starting to explore that. We have a concept out there that we're hoping some school nibbles on, and that is using these computer modeling vulnerability analysis tools that Collier County now has at its disposal to actually look at where on the landscape Collier County, where and when, I should say, on the landscape Collier County is likely to be vulnerable to seawater flooding due to nuisance, sea level rise, and due to storms. And we're hoping that that analysis will look at more socially vulnerable communities within our county, and then do that cooperatively with city or county government. So we're hoping that has some traction. And I think that's about it in terms of the kinds of things we're trying to attempt. Again, I think maybe the point of all of this is a concept that's easily adaptable and applicable anywhere and everywhere. I don't keep track of these things, but I suspect these kinds of efforts are not just happening in Collier County. They're probably happening all around the world and all around the country. But if you are, I know there are FGCU students here. I don't know if there aren't any high school students in the Zoom room, but if you as FGCU students have connections locally to high schools, or if you want to develop a similar kind of program at FGCU that uses sort of the Yak approach and concept, I think that'd be wonderful. So I'll leave it at that. And I welcome your ideas and your questions.
Holly, I saw some questions pop up. Was there anything from Mike specifically that popped up that he could answer now in the chat? I think one of them was about solar, and he actually answered that.
Yes, you did answer that. The other question that I just see from Yoon is, can we use the event's background and take some pictures? So if with everybody's permission, go ahead and take a screenshot if everybody,
Okay.
that's okay with everybody. And Mike, I know it's a whole other talk, and we want to hear our students. They have some passions they want to speak about, but I just want to mention the Southwest Florida Resiliency Compact because you've spearheaded that. And so I'm going to just put a little link in here. It's a little article about it that people can check out afterwards.
Yeah, and if there's time later or you want, I'm happy to talk about that too. I just don't want to get people off topic and off agenda.
Exactly. Wanted to acknowledge that.
I'm good at
Thank you.
distracting people.
Yeah. Okay. Over to you, Linda.
Okay, so has Houston come on yet? No? Okay, then we'll turn this program over to our students who wants to go first to share?
I'll go ahead and take
Okay,
this one
Marion,
from
thank
you.
you. Thank you.
Hey, how's it going? My name is Marion Barracks. I am a current FGCU junior studying environmental studies with my concentration in water resource management and a minor in geology. My hope is to make sure that we continue to use the water that we have now in a sustainable way, because as the population increases, we're going to need more water to grow the crops that we need to feed the people and for other industrial uses. I pulled up a stat that was in 2050, we're projected to have a population of around 9 billion people. And with that, there's going to be an increase of about 15% for our water use that we're going to need to supplement somehow. But all the while, there's 40% of people are already living in situations of extreme water scarcity. So figuring out ways to collectively get everybody the water that they need for the practices that for the uses that they need would be incredible. I was initially interested in this throughout just the courses I've been taking. First, in high school, I took the AP Environmental Science coursework, and then now at FGCU, I'm in environmental chemistry, and we're going over how important this stuff is and the ways that we can, the management efforts that we have for water now, like conservation, turning wastewater into potable water, and the more wealthy places using desalination efforts. So taking ocean water and making that potable. I don't know where currently my interests lie, but I think that any of those paths would be really interesting to venture into after I graduate from FGCU. I think that it would be really interesting to study the effects of climate change on the hydrological cycle, because as water becomes more unpredictable, there's an increase in flooding and droughts, and storms are becoming more intense and happening more frequently, like hurricanes, which affect our area more than others. And I think that really garnering an interest in finding solutions and advocating for the problem are really right up my alley. And I'm so excited to see what my future holds in the realm of water and what the realm of water holds for the future of us as people.
Thank you, Marion. Thank you. Next.
I would like to speak next.
Okay, Peyton.
Okay, so my name is Peyton Lunsford. I'm a junior at FGCU with a concentration in ecology and environmental assessment. It is my career goal to become a park ranger in one of our national or state parks. But today I'm talking about a personal interest of mine when it comes to the environment and lessening our load and especially our carbon footprint upon the world as a whole. I titled my little speech, Resetting Nuclear Energy. And I know to some, the topic of nuclear energy is contentious or even taboo when talking about the future of the climate and how we produce clean energy. I believe we can all agree, though, that most anything is better than the current global majority dependence on coal, oil, and other natural gases to meet our energy needs. And this time will not be taken as well. This time will not be taken to take a jab at solar, wind, or hydro, because all those technologies are uniquely beneficial and absolutely the future of renewables. Instead, I'll be focusing on using this time to reset our understanding of nuclear energy and how it can be used as an indispensable tool to reduce our burden upon the earth. I will first address the primary concern, and I believe even Holly brought it up when I mentioned talking about this, when it comes to nuclear energy and its safety. I would guess that when nuclear energy is mentioned, most think of the catastrophe of the Chernobyl plant, more recently the Fukushima Daiichi incident, or even closer to home and older, the 3 Mile Island incident. All of these incidents were absolutely tragedies, and I do not intend to deviate from the idea that these were avoidable tragedies that caused many people to leave their homes and some even to lose their lives. Though one might think that these tragedies would be common with how much they are talked about and reported on, that when it comes to nuclear power, the cost of human life is high, and yet it is not. To the contrary, according to Max Roser, the number of people who lose their lives from nuclear power production, as an estimate, including everything from mining incidents to the incidents I just talked about, is 0.07 per terawatt hour. This is only beaten by solar and wind energy, which are 0.02 and 0.04 respectively. And of course, all three of these are magnitudes better than fossil fuels. Even in the tragedies I discussed, they are poorly understood. In the case of Fukushima Daiichi and the 3 Mile Island incident, it is reported that 0 people died as a direct consequence of the incident. Now, there is debate among epidemiologists as to the effects of contamination from these events, and there certainly was in the surrounding areas. But with information collected by the 3 Mile Island Public Health Fund following the event, there's no consistent evidence that the incident caused higher rates of cancer in the surrounding area. In the more recent Fukushima Daiichi incident, this is very similar, with estimates from Stanford University putting the number of cancer cases directly caused from the incident at an estimate of 199. Any death, now I will be clear, any death caused by nuclear power is a tragedy, but with thousands of people being lost daily to the pollution caused by fossil fuels and their immediate and long-term effects, it is negligent to castigate nuclear power for being unsafe when it stands ready to save countless by displacing these fossil fuels. Now, I also wish to talk about the direct benefits of nuclear energy. The cost of producing energy, as a rule, is essential for factoring in its implementation, how well it can be used on a large scale. The cost of creating a nuclear plant is high. However, from Hartley, nuclear plants have high capital but low operating costs, meaning that once their construction is finished, their operating cost is very low, especially when considered to, say, other sources of even renewable energy. When compared to, say, a wind farm that produces 100 megawatts of power, a nuclear power plant costs 2.6 times more to build and maintain, but produces 22 times the power output on over a year. As well, when talking about carbon emissions, the chief three that produce zero carbon emissions are wind, solar, and nuclear. That cause zero direct, like when you see the funnel stacks for a nuclear power plant, what's coming out, that is water vapor. That is not CO2 emissions. That is all water vapor. Now, there is a lot of talk about the indirect carbon emissions from renewables of previously mentioned. Now, say nuclear requires mining for its fuel, enriching uranium and creating fuel pellets. Solar requires mining for producing its photovoltaic cells. And wind requires mining to, say, create the concrete bases, the towers, and the petroleum for some of the plastics used. There is some debate about the secondary emissions caused by these three. But a measure that I found from a researcher named Fox, not a Fox that I might say, that not Fox News, a researcher named Fox, that a measure they found across several studies was that it was approximately 9 to 21 grams of CO2 produced per kilowatt hour, 10 to 48 for wind, and approximately 100 to 280 for solar. And of course, all three of these are much better than the 960 to 1300 for coal. So that means that even at its least generous estimate, nuclear power produces approximately 2% of the carbon emissions secondarily from coal directly. Now, I believe I'm coming close to time, so I will finish with how this connects to reset directly. In an effort to connect to younger generations, to get them interested in what they can do to reset the human impacts on the planet, I thought to when I was younger, and I didn't exactly know what I wanted to do in college. When I was say 18 and first going into college, I was like, I want to be an engineer. And I realized that, say, the older generation, we could be, you guys, and even us, we're older than people going to college. We could be the ones that tell them about nuclear energy and give them the hope that, say, the spark that drives them into adulthood, where they might be the ones to discover new technologies that make nuclear smaller, safer, and more efficient than it already is. This connection between the older generation and the younger generations on how nuclear energy has progressed, and in my view, has been unfairly maligned. It can be the older generation that brings the idea back around to inspire the younger generation to take up the mantle of nuclear energy once again for the hope of a reset. See, there's some things in chat.
Yeah, thank you, Peyton. You certainly did your homework for that. An excellent presentation.
Okay. Should I answer some questions now, or should I wait till the end?
Are there questions?
Yeah, there's 2 or 3 questions in there for Peyton.
Okay.
From what I've seen about hurricanes, and this is very similar to the Fukushima Daiichi incident, where it wasn't the earthquake that directly damaged the plant. It was a tsunami that came in, and it also didn't directly damage the plant. What it did is it flooded, I believe it was these diesel engines that were used to keep the plant running and to keep the power, the actual fuel cores, like stable, so that but what happened is that those generators were flooded by the tsunami, and they went out, and that caused the cores to overheat and the explosions that subsequently happened. In regards to hurricanes, I didn't find any directly for Florida, but I do know there are actually 2 nuclear power plants on the Miami side of the states. And from what I did read some of the safety concerns, especially with coastal nuclear power plants when I was first researching this. And as far as I know, it is a standard practice to no longer keep the secondary diesel engines underground. They are to be kept above ground in response to Fukushima Daiichi. Approaching integrating nuclear energy in the broad public, as you stated on the public. That is tougher because of how, I will say, sensationalized a lot of the nuclear disasters are. And for good cause, nuclear energy can be dangerous if mishandled, but that is the same for any tool. wind and solar, if you mishandle them, of course, you won't get a major incident. But with nuclear, it has the full capability to be handled safely, and it's the rewards for the risks, I would say, are absolutely worth it. With the broader public, yes, site selection is very important. With the broader public, I would say it would take, say, just off the top of my head, I think it would take a major organization that is interested, like Greenpeace, say even government institutions, National Park Service, well, organizations that are directly concerned with the well-being of the earth and the environment, to start talking about nuclear energy again and talk about its benefits. Do not detract from its dangers, because yes, if, like many things, when mishandled, it can be dangerous, but the rewards of safe usage are globally impacting.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, and newer designs are much, much safer. Like the incident with Chernobyl, that was way towards the beginning. Oh, I shouldn't get into it too much, but yes, thank you for the questions.
Morgan, would you like to go next?
So I'm Morgan. My major is history, but I am very interested in the environment. Something I want to do is move into teaching, and hopefully I could start one of these climate organizations at a school where I would teach. Today I'm going to kind of talk about something that I personally didn't know a lot about until I started researching for it, and that's composting. I think composting would be a really good activity to start in schools, like maybe with a science program, or just something that kids can do in both primary and secondary, where they can see and actively like compost at school with the food waste maybe from cafeterias, because at school lunches there is definitely a lot of food waste that builds up, especially over time. And it would be a good way for them to see in like with their own eyes how they can make a difference. And with using the soil that they make with composting, they could bring it to community gardens and they could use it, or food forests. Like I know my college has a food forest, or they could use it in their own gardens and grow their own foods. And they can see, just like with composting, see the impact that they can have. And like, hopefully that's something that would keep them interested. And like, even with like, as they get older and they start to find out different things that they want to do, seeing that composting doesn't take too much of your time and your day to just, you know, throw stuff in there, turn it if it needs turned, make sure it's okay, and then moving on. And that would be something that they could teach hopefully their kids, and it could just start like a snowball effect and start the movement of kind of growing and getting different like communities involved. And it could even bring like outside of school, it could bring communities together with, so maybe if they don't have a community garden, that's something they could try and start in their area and get different people involved. And I think like especially with primary school, little kids aren't really as afraid of getting dirty. And so it's something they could really like get their hands into and kind of, you know, bring like young minds into this world of climate change, and seeing that something small like this does have a big difference if they continue to stick with it over time.
Thank you, Morgan. Thank you. Jessie?
Well, hello everyone. My name is Jessie Rivera. I'm a junior marine science student here at Florida Gulf Coast University. And today I would like to cover one consequence of climate change that I find is often glossed over when thinking about the grand scheme of things. This would be the acidification of our oceans. This is commonly known as ocean acidification, which is a super creative name. There is a large chemistry component to this process, but I promise that I will keep it short and sweet. So by definition, ocean acidification is the process in which excess carbon dioxide in our atmosphere is absorbed by the ocean, which makes the water more acidic. Now, the ocean naturally absorbs about 70% of the carbon dioxide that gets released into our atmosphere. But there's just so much CO2 in our air today that the ocean has to keep absorbing more and more. Now, this excess CO2 comes from just about anything that uses or produces non-renewable energy sources, just like what Peyton was talking about earlier with fossil fuels. So that just totals about every popular cheap source of energy in the world. This is a major problem because as the ocean absorbs more carbon dioxide, the CO2 goes through a very important chemical reaction. The CO2 reacts with water to create carbonic acid. So more CO2 means more carbonic acid. The acidity levels in the oceans have risen about 30% since the Industrial Revolution, so since about the 1800s. And NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, they have predicted this percentage to be nearly 100% by the end of the century. So by the end of the century, they say that the acidity levels are going to be 100 times the level that they should be naturally. This increase in acidity spells trouble for just about every living and non-living thing in our oceans, especially creatures that use a very special material called calcium carbonate. Calcium carbonate is a very strong material that many sea creatures use to provide structures to their body and to also protect themselves. So animals that use this material include clams, oysters, crabs, lobsters, and the list goes on and on, just about anything with a shell. But most notably are the coral reefs. Coral is a living animal and it grows around a calcium carbonate skeleton. So as the acidity in the ocean increases, many things happen to these little corals. First, the skeletons of these creatures can actually begin to deteriorate from underneath the living creature, making them not be able to protect themselves from predation or from any sort of anything that can harm them. Or after the coral dies, the skeleton itself gets eaten away by the acid. Now, this process can actually be seen from your own home if you have a shell from the beach and just a little bit of vinegar. The vinegar is an acidic solution and the shell is made out of calcium carbonate. So if you put a little shell into a little bit of vinegar, you have a small scale representation of what is happening in our oceans today in your own home. The second thing that can happen to our coral is a combination of a couple different consequences of climate change. So when ocean acidification and fluctuating temperatures work together, they make a very unfavorable living condition for the little coral and for their symbiotic friends. So coral actually have tiny algae that live within the tissues that help them eat and provide them with energy. So when the ocean is unfavorable for them. So when the ocean is acidic and when temperatures are high or too low, the algae will expel themselves from the coral, leaving the coral to die. And you may have heard of this. A common name for this process is called coral bleaching. So the algae leaves and it leaves behind transparent tissues of the coral, and all you see is the bone white calcium carbonate skeleton, which will then be eaten away by the acid later. Reports from NOAA estimate that close to 90% of our Florida reef tract has died, and almost 30% of the world's tropical reef systems have disappeared since the 1980s. Now, I can go on and on about ocean acidification, but you all are here today to listen to the voices of youth on climate change. And because of that, I would like to propose a way to get even younger people than just us interested in the environment. I believe that education needs to start with the young generations of children that will grow up to become more eco-conscious and will have a better appreciation for the natural world. Raising kids in this way will ensure a new generation of people who will take care of our Earth rather than continue to destroy it. I used to work at Biscayne National Park as an intern, and some of my work included education programs for kids to be able to go out on fishing boats and be on the water. Now, Biscayne National Park is down south of Miami, and for some of these kids that we took on the boat, it was their first time that they had ever seen water. They had no idea that they lived so close to an ocean. And after their time at the park, they would often come up to me or any of the park rangers, and they would tell us that they would go home to their family and tell them how excited they were to actually hold a fish or to see the ocean, to touch the ocean. A park ranger at Biscayne, his name is Jay, he told me once that kids will not care for something until that they have held that thing in their own hands. Those kids that I taught at Biscayne, they understand conservation, even if they don't know the exact definition of the word. So I truly believe that the only way for our Earth to get better is to raise a new generation of people that are better for our Earth. But we simply can't do this by throwing plants or animals at kids when they are very, very young. Instead, we should form a curriculum that should be made so it will follow kids up past high school, so that when these kids go into the world, they will have a better understanding of how the Earth functions around them. And this may be a way to help solve the issue of pollution, because pollution at its simplest form is done by people who are either ignorant to the consequences of their actions, or they simply do not care because they have removed themselves from the natural world around them. So both of these scenarios can be avoided through proper environmental education. Thank you.
Thank you. No, I feel like my future is in better hands just with with all that you know that you've actually been able to share with us today. And impressive, I have to say, are your presentations. So thank you for all the time that you put in. And I'm curious, if one of you, or well, any of you, could speak maybe briefly to what benefits you felt like you received from being involved with Reset, and the program that you're involved in, which is civic engagement, I think, right? Is that the name of the class, civic engagement? And you came to us with your ideas of what you wanted to be part of. So can anybody speak to that? Perhaps what you learned from us from being involved?
I learned that activism is everywhere. That, like, there are always events going on and people are always getting together to spread the word and make things happen. I am currently in school, I'm volunteering, I work, and I always feel like I don't have the time to get out and do stuff, but knowing that there's always something going on, maybe if you have some time at 2 o'clock on a Saturday, you can get together with some friends and talk about climate action, and like the small stuff matters. And I think that's really important that y'all are promoting.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else, any comments? If not, it's a perfect introduction to Salimi, because she is an activist, and she wasn't when I first met her, but now the woman is so busy, I can't keep up with her. So, and before she speaks, I would like to acknowledge we do have one high school student on, and that is the young man, the young man who is host for our event today, is doing all the recording and the techie stuff. And his name is Evan Carville. And who else is with us from high school, Holly?
Well, I think Salemi's son is with us. Is
Oh,
Alexander
yes.
with us?
Yes, he is.
Yes.
Alex.
I think
Alex.
Alex is with us. And
Thank
I
you,
think
Alex.
that Ensign's grandson, are you in high school as well?
Yes.
So we do have high school
High
students.
school
with us.
students.
He's in middle school, right? You're in
Even
middle-
better.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Max is a senior now in high school.
Okay. Thank you for joining us, Max. And now we'll hear from.
And Angie is too. Angie Cortez is from Golden Gate High. So welcome, Angie. Welcome all of you young people. We really want to be in conversation with you ongoing. It's our dream.
Salimi, go ahead.
All right, thank you. Well, hello, everyone. And thank you for joining us and giving us your precious time to be part of the solution. My name is Salemi Hernandez, and I have the honor to be Citizens Climate Lobby Southeast Regional Coordinator. I support volunteers organizing in Florida, Alabama, Georgia, North Carolina, and South Carolina. I'm also a part-time student in FGCU of political science. Maybe you have heard a lot of us lately in the news or from the Biden administration about COP26. But what is COP26? COP26 is the 2021 United Nations Climate Change Conference. For nearly 3 decades, the United Nations has been bringing together almost every country on Earth for a global climate summit called COP, which stands for Conference of the Parties. In this time, climate change has come from being a fringe issue to a global priority. This year, it will be the 26th annual summit, and it's called COP26. With the UK as the president, the COP26 will take place in Glasgow, Scotland. The Conference of the Parties, or COP, is an annual 2-week meeting of 197 parties, meaning 196 nations plus the European Union, that are signatories to the 1992 United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. The role of an observer, like me, to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, or UNFCCC, which I'm going to start referring to, negotiation process is critically important because it helps to ensure transparency and accountability, and also helps to neutralize the politics that puts wealthy polluting interests between government action and climate change. Observers like me interact officially with the UNFCCC process through a defined constituency, some of which are named in the convention or in the Paris Agreement. But all of the constituents have an standing as representatives of the stakeholders across the world. Citizens Climate Lobby, the organization I represent, is an environmental NGO, part of an ENGO constituent. And we can submit comments to the secretary at the end of the conference. I am going to COP26 to advocate for just, community-driven, all-of-society climate action through a strong implementation of Action for Climate Empowerment, which is a term adopted by the UNFCCC to denotate work under the Article 6 of the Convention in 1992 and Article 12 of the Paris Agreement. The overarching goal of ACE, or Action for Climate Empowerment, is to empower all members of society to engage in climate action through education, training, public awareness, public participation, public access to information, and international cooperation on those issues. We want to develop a strong civic engagement, access to information, communication, and coordination, and only by working together, we can get this done. Thanks to the support of the Water Foundation and the Reset Center, our host today, we have a climate empowerment virtual lab. This virtual lab that we call the People's Pavilion seeks to elevate action for climate empowerment efforts and open the civic space of the UNFCCC. And it aims to provide a blueprint on how to make open public participation in climate negotiations a norm. We want to provide a virtual space for people from all around to interact with and share their vision for a climate smart future directly into the climate talk space. There will be a satellite events. We're going to be streaming some of the forums through citizen assemblies, and we're going to have listening sessions. We want this to be a cooperative space and are looking for partners who want to contribute. And soon I'm going to be providing everybody information, because this platform is going to be open for all of you to join and be virtually in the climate talks. So I hope our conversation today helps you to see a path forward for a future with a livable and healthy planet. And remember, Every moment is an organizing opportunity. Every person a potential activist. Even with the most simple action, like contacting your elected official, you can make a difference. And every minute, a chance to change the world. And that's it.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Since I think I heard a quote where action was the antidote to anxiety. So all of us who are anxious about our future, we can take action and be the change that we want to see in the world. That's what we're here for. So since Joe Benassia isn't here to talk about the Florida 5, I'm going to ask Paul Arsenault, who's been a spokesperson for the right to clean water, to say a few words. I see the grimace on his face.
Right.
Well, Gary here too.
One thing that is kind of exciting coming up with Glasgow is KC, who is now the water keeper for Collier County, is going to be there, and he's going to be giving a daily podcast as an observer and just kind of give his take as he sees it there. So that'll be an interesting window into what's happening, anything is possible. So we're happy to have that accessibility, and we're just being a newly formed, well, my joining the board is just recent, but we have a wonderful idea and program coming up that will be a lot more engaging. Having KC as the water keeper is going to be make things a little more proactive. So we're excited about that directive.
Okay, thank you. Gary, do you have any comments about the Florida 5 and update? Florida5.org. Does everybody know what that is? Why don't you tell them just in case, Gary? You're on mute.
Just a tiny bit of history, and I know that I've got just a couple minutes here. Orange County passed a right to clean water amendment to their charter back in November last year. And it gives every citizen of the Orange County the right to clean water and a legal standing to bring suit against people who pollute the water. And it gives each of the water systems and every element of it a right to exist, to flow, to be pollution free, and to have a healthy ecosystem. It passed by 89.2% of the vote in November last year. And as one guy said, you can't even get people to agree that by that percentage, 89.2%, you could never get that many people to agree that today's Saturday, let alone get people to actually vote for it. And so it's got tremendous popularity among people. One of the county commissioners prior to the vote on the amendment actually ran almost exclusively on right to clean water, and she won by just under 60% of the vote. Thomas Lindsay is a person who's working behind the scenes with us. He's from the Center for Democratic and Environmental Rights out of Spokane, Washington now. And Holly, I think we can put some of these connections in online so that people can see them. We've been trying to get, after the great success in Orange County, trying to get a petition in the whole state of Florida to bring a right to clean water along with 4 other statewide petitions for changes to the Constitution. And we've run into all kinds of landmines along the way, and we're regrouping. We're hoping to be able to get something done for 2022, but we're regrouping, and we will be heading into 2024, trying to just narrow the aim at getting a right to clean water, along with an element of the protection of the wetlands. And that will be, you can find great information on FL5, and that's the number 5, just 3 digits. Okay, you've got it in there, fl5.org. And more generally, the Florida Rights of Nature Network.org is also great. And we will need all of the help that we can. We need everybody on board that we can get on board to help with the petitions when we reignite this effort. We'll have an announcement on November 1st and I'm sorry, December 1st, and on there'll be kickoff on February 2nd in 2022. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Gary. And I had a question, I think. Houston still hasn't come on to talk about all of the Everglades, so.
No,
Okay, well.
but I'll say one thing about it. The part of why we wanted to bring Houston here is because he offers an experience through his nonprofit called Love the Everglades movement of bringing young people deep into the Everglades, into Big Cypress and into the swamps so that we fall in love with nature and then we want to protect her. And so I just want to say that even though we don't see Houston here, I'm sure he has a good reason he couldn't make it. Maybe he's wrestling with the alligator, I don't know. But but he has agreed to take the 4 of you, Peyton and Morgan and Jesse and Marion, and also Abe and Caden, our other students that we've been working with on an Everglades experience. So we'll be doing that, going deep into the Everglades with you all and walking around in the swamps and experiencing what that is. And I just loved what every single one of you 4 students had to say. Every single one of you is really important. I noticed that Ted Brown, who's one of our Reset advisors, was nodding his head very much when you were talking, Peyton, about nuclear energy. And Ted Brown is an amazing and well-known scientist. And I think that he would back you up a whole lot on the stuff that you said. Right, Ted? You just give a nod.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I want to go back to Mike Savarasi. This is the perfect time to be hearing about the resiliency compact. So can you give us an update on that, Mike?
Yeah, sure. Happy to. Most of you know, maybe some of you don't, but there was recent legislation passed by the state of Florida. The bill was SB 1954, was signed by the governor. Basically, the law has lots of implications, but one of the great consequences of that act of law is that it empowers alliances, local governments within a region that can come together and build strength through number and effectively dealing with issues of resilience, dealing with the impacts of climate change as they come our way. And the state now, most counties, at least coastal counties in Florida, if they're not already in some sort of an alliance, are working on developing an alliance. And Southwest Florida are 3 counties, Charlotte, Lee, and Collier. And there are 12 municipalities or other local governments within those 3 counties. The 15 of us have come together with a commitment to form an alliance and to form a compact. And we had our first organizational meeting on October 8th. And it seems odd, but the very step of getting 15 jurisdictions to come together and agree that this is a problem that has to be addressed and that there's a great advantage to doing this as a collective was a great accomplishment. Exactly how this compact manifests itself, governs itself, and what kinds of objectives it undertakes is really up to those jurisdictions. And for me personally, it's been very rewarding, but also very frustrating because I hear a lot of what I heard here today in this conversation is a lot of hopes and dreams and aspirations for how a region might behave, and ultimately the governments have to decide what to do and what's right for them. It's very hard to impose an agenda if you want everybody to participate. and operate through consensus. So I'm very pleased to know that our counties and our cities are going to be embarking on this. We now have resources behind it. Time will tell. The next few months will determine exactly what these governments decide to do collectively, what kind of mission they decide to take on. And I remain hopeful and pleased to know that we're doing something. Our region, for whatever reason, has always seemed to be further behind other parts of the state when it comes to dealing with climate change and the impacts it's likely to have. One of the things that's clear about our region, and you can hear it through many of the comments that were made in today's meeting, our region seems less focused on mitigating carbon and more so focused on dealing with the consequences that I guess local government perceives as inevitable. And that's just a nice way of saying it seems like much of the state and our region is okay with dealing with the symptoms and treating with the symptoms of climate change. But what's really needed is treating the fundamental root cause of climate change, and that's reducing greenhouse gas production. And, you know, I listened to everything that was said today very, very intently. And the young people, the FGCU students that spoke, you're all to be commended for embarking on these passions. The only cautionary note I would make is it's important now more than ever to focus whatever passions you have on treating not the symptoms, okay, but rather the root cause of climate change. Nuclear power and educating young people, they're all necessary and positive steps to helping as we move into the future. But the truth is, we have at best a decade to make a difference before we go down a horrific path. And if it's the young people that are going to carry the torch of passion, let's make sure that that torch lights the right fires. And lights the right fires that deals more directly with the way we deal with greenhouse gas production. I know Solomon is still here. The whole focus of COP26, the whole focus of Citizens Climate Lobby is really all about that. It's like all hands on deck for dealing with greenhouse gas production. That's what really is going to matter in the next 5 to 10 years. So I apologize for hopping on a soapbox.
No, I'm glad you did. So Gary, you have a comment?
Yes, Mike, I hope that you and Reset can have a conversation about what you've just been talking about, because we have from the beginning wanted to get to the root causes of the crises that we're dealing with. And certainly we're not adequately doing that in Southwest Florida. And we'd love to work with you to figure out how we can do that more effectively.
Yeah, I'd be happy to have those conversations. I can tell you the compact in Southwest Florida, yes, the compact is going to exist. The compact is going to deal with problems of vulnerability and adaptation. How do we make ourselves less vulnerable? But they're not going to take on, at least anytime in the near future, the root causes of climate change. And one can argue that what does it matter whether a local region reduces its greenhouse gas production? It's too tremendous of a problem that has to be handled on a national and international level. And I suppose there's some merit to that, but the world leads by example, and so local regions can make a difference. And so that's why I'm inspired by harnessing the passion of young people to make a difference. I really hope that this YAC effort that I mentioned earlier, where YAC will, through the public school district, will look at its own greenhouse gas production, and maybe that's a wake-up call for local government, and so again, if there's ways of weaving your interests, harness those passions and interests and try to make a difference when it comes to greenhouse gas production, that would be a good thing.
Holly, you have your hand up, and then I saw Ted had his hand up.
Okay, I'll be brief. I know we're winding it up, but there's one last link I'm going to put in the chat. And this link is about Big Cypress. So Big Cypress National Preserve is about to be fracked. So something happened when Trump left office and he handed over the 404 permitting of, and that's the permitting of development in sensitive wetlands. He handed it over to Governor DeSantis. And Governor DeSantis already had a contract going with a number of oil companies, all lined up, ready to sign and give them permits. And now they want to frack and drill in Big Cypress National Preserve. And so I'm putting a link in here that will take you to a petition that any of you can sign, all of you can sign, and maybe the high school students can't yet. But if you're registered to vote and you can sign that petition, that might help push the conversation. But there's going to be a lot of action about this in the coming months. So I just thought I would mention that about Big Cypress, because that's part of the beautiful place that we want to take you all out to. And we cannot let this happen. We cannot let hydraulic fracturing happen in Florida at all. And so that's all I'm going to say about that. But that's a little action item that we could do today, right now, is to go to that site, take a look, learn a little bit about what's going on in Big Cypress and sign the petition. So thank you.
Thank you, Holly. Ted, you had your hand up.
Yeah, when I hear Mike speaking and all the students speaking, there's a lot of great stuff that's been said today. And the problem is that there are so many fronts on which we could try to take action. Some of them are short range things, such as what Holly just talked about. Talking about reducing carbon emissions, maybe we can't do that much in Florida because a lot of that problem resides out in the heartlands where we have agricultural practices which need to be entirely reformed in order for us to do much good. The whole business about nuclear, Peyton's absolutely right about this. Nuclear power is absolutely going to be essential to act as a bridge source of energy for us when we go we don't have enough possibilities for moving from the renewables such as wind and solar without the aid of a stable, regular backup system, and nuclear can provide that safely. And so these are the kinds of arguments. Some of them are long range, some of them are short range, but we have to be interested in everything. And it can seem sometimes as though, oh my God, what can I do? Well, you can just do whatever you can. Write letters, talk to people, make the case with whatever place you can speak, because that's our only way of letting people know that there are issues that we want something to be done about them. If we don't speak, no one will pay attention to us.
Okay. Any more questions before we conclude? I think I have one, and I think that Mike might be the only person on here that can answer it. And that is, who or what organization in the state determines how much water we actually need now for the current population and how much water we would need for a projected population? And is there a formula for that?
Yeah, I believe the answer I'm going to give you is a correct one, but I don't know with 100% certainty. I think those responsibilities fall within the water management districts throughout Florida.
Yeah.
And so each water management district basically controls or monitors, controls, and manages the hydrology of one of the major watersheds within the state. And of course, the South Florida Water Management District, which embraces our region and all of the Everglades from, Kissimmee all the way down into the Florida Keys, is the largest. And so, it is that agency, a tax-based, board-based. I mean, there are appointed board members by the governor. It's up to those agencies then to determine whether water needs are being met, potability water needs are being met, water quality issues are being met or addressed and being met. So in there lies the influence, I think.
Thank you.
And, you know, I've worked with the South Florida Water Management District for many, many years, a couple of decades at least now, at least the South Florida Water Management District, a little bit with the Southwest Florida Water Management District. And, you know, the people that are doing the work are dedicated professionals, lots of scientists and engineers and modelers, and they all are well-intended, objective people. But like so much else in state government, there's, you know, political influence, you know, as that information trickles up through the administrative hierarchies. So,
Mike, I just can't help butting in here. I think we cannot ignore the powerful influence of private organizations such as Bonita Springs Utilities. These are the people who are managing, who are taking the water out of the ground to provide us with our water. I spent a lot of time when I was living in Florida. I've moved since away from Florida, but I spent a lot of time talking to the people at the Bonita Springs Utilities and looking into the geology of Florida. The things that are going on underground are the things that the Southwest Florida management people don't really pay that much attention to. Those aquifers and the ways in which they are being filled or not filled are the things that are going to control the availability of fresh water for us. And the future is rather fraught. You realize that right now, 50% of the water that we drink here in this area is actually desalinated water, because the water from the aquifers from which that water is drawn during some parts of the year are from water underground that is already heavily salinated and must be desalinated. What does the future hold for us in that regard? There's a lot of big questions that need to be answered that people are not paying attention to.
well, there are many local organizations that are obviously, you know, dealing with the same kinds of issues, but at least within our state government, it's principally the water management districts, and the water management districts do deal with groundwater issues as well as surface water issues. Anyway, but a good point.
Thank you. Well, I think it's time to wind us down. It's 3:18. I want to thank all of you for staying overtime. And we will be sending out a link to this so you can share it with anybody whom you knew that wanted to come that couldn't, and pass it around. And it'll be on our website too. So, thank you. Thank you all for coming. I sincerely am grateful. And I'm so proud of all of the students who did so much homework and just were shining stars at their presentation. It was such a joy and a blessing to work with you. Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.